So in today's video, we are going to talk about one of the problems that I see far too many amateur golfers make. And it's all about, well, the discussion of the shoulders and the role they play in the golf swing. To get started in this conversation, we have to understand the importance of different sort of elements of the golf swing. And as a priority, the backswing. So what you're trying to do, or what you should be trying to do in the backswing position, is create a stretch. You're trying to stretch to activate muscles to store up energy so you can deliver that onto the back of the golf ball coming in towards the downswing position. Now, something that doesn't get coined as often now is an X-factor stretch, and this is the difference between the upper body rotation against the lower body. But for many amateur golfers that I meet, I still kind of talk about this, and the reason why is that in the backswing position, it's your upper body that is moving in that sequence first. So it's more sort of hands, arms, and then obviously with things like chest rotation followed on by the lower body. That's the kind of sequence that we're looking for. So when I meet people that are sort of moving around unnecessarily, which we'll come into in this video, I'm always talking about the importance of understanding the feeling of kind of like rotating your upper body against your lower body. And that's similar to what I'm demonstrating here on gears. So I'm not advertising the fact that you shouldn't move your lower body, but I actually think it's quite a beneficial thing to think about when you achieve the top of your backswing position. You need to achieve a 90 degrees worth of shoulder rotation, and you theoretically don't want to excessively move your lower body because you create less of a stretch. Equally, I'm not advertising the idea that you shouldn't move your lower body at all, so you give yourself pain and discomfort. But you have to bear in mind that the backswing is very much a stretch, and the idea in the backswing is not to rotate the upper and the lower body at the same rate of rotation, because you'll find rotation very easy, but you're never going to create any of that sort of stretching and loading, which is really, really important. So the benefits of going down this sort of route is that when you start thinking about, okay, as I talk about a lot on the channel, keep your trail leg flexed, turn your upper body in the backswing position. What you start to do is, again, you start to feel levels of activation. And what it does is it kind of gives you that ability to rotate against that lower body, create that resistance so you can keep that backswing, should we say, nice and short. But it also gives you a platform to utilize that trail side to push off coming in towards the downswing. So again, I can't underestimate the importance of, so far, that is the thing that most amateur golfers aren't doing in their swing. So if you're a golfer who struggles fundamentally with movement through the ball, and you're very much aware of that, and you'd be aware of that because when you're hitting a golf ball, it will feel more like a hit, or just like it's just your arms moving, or you'll often feel off balance, or you know that you're not producing as much sort of speed or as much distance as maybe you sort of know deep down you're more capable of. Well, then I'd put you into that category of the golfer who is rotating the shoulders in the backswing position. Now, to be careful with this, I'm going to paint a very clear picture of exactly what I mean. So if I put the club across my shoulders, and in the backswing position, if I sort of just concentrate here, as I've sort of stated before, just sort of turning my shoulders in the backswing position without thinking about some of the previous points of, you know, resisting with the lower body, then what has a tendency to happen, again, a very common amateur tendency, is that, well, the first thing you can see from this perspective, it is my head starts to move in towards this direction, so it moves off the ball. That's something we don't necessarily want to encourage. The second problem is that, well, instead of turning into the leg, which gives you this ability to stay more centered, you start turning more over the leg. So the second problem is you start to sort of stand up as opposed to stay in posture, just from this idea of turning the shoulders, so to speak. And when you start putting both of those movements together, well, all of a sudden you end up shifting too much weight on towards your trail leg. You're going to get stuck there. And also it's going to really limit your ability to elevate the club. You know, when we're rotating back, we want to be thinking more about the chest rotation in the backswing position. What that's going to do is that's going to give you what's known as much more thoracic extension, which means you can lift your arms up higher. So I think the first thing to do to counter the problem in the backswing position is, rather than putting your hands across your shoulders when you're sort of trying to get a feel for the correct backswing, maybe put your hands across sort of your chest like so, and then try and get your hands pointing away to the wall. This is something I've talked about in a recent video, and what you'll start to do is, if you start to keep this flexed and move like so, you're going to have that ability to create a rotation where you're going to get a much stronger sense of stretching, but you're also going to have that ability to stay in posture and get yourself into a much better backswing position and avoid the mistake of moving the shoulders. Think about more what your chest is trying to do, or even your sort of trunk, so to speak. So for a moment, that's the backswing discussed and the mistake that tends to see when moving the shoulders, but the downswing is equally such a problem. And what we tend to see with golfers who start moving the shoulders excessively in the downswing are the type of golfer that comes too much over the top. So how do you stop that though? And I personally feel like most of the damage has been done in the backswing, because you need a trigger to start the downswing. So if you end up moving too much over towards your trail side, well, as soon as you try and move, to the left, you're going to start triggering a rotation. And if everything starts again rotating at the same rate of rotation, then you are going to be constantly fighting this over the top, and you're going to be scared to trigger any sort of rotation at all. So this is where your sequencing becomes really important in the golf swing, and it's best sort of thinking that, well, we want to start getting the sense that we want to be moving to the lead side as you're still rotating in the backswing position, because what this does is this gives you that ability to, as you're taking the club up, move to the lead side. So by the time you feel that movement towards the left or towards your lead side has been instigated, then you can trigger rotation. And what that does is that gives you a much better, what's known as kinematic sequence. And it means that you can lead with the lower body coming in towards the downswing position. And it starts to get rid of that over the top movement. But, and this is what I sort of see all of the time, is golfers like the recentering motion. Go back to this type of exercise here, just to talk about the common problem. And golfers, when I start saying, oh yeah, move towards the lead side as you're swinging back, that's great. But what I tend to see is golfers, again, they lose that ability to create that resistance and load. And we don't want to do that. So the best way to do this exercise is to get yourself against the wall. And if you get yourself once in posture, about a fingertips distance away from the wall. And what I want you to do is I want you to focus in the early part of the backswing position, so just before your shoulders reach 90 degrees. And it would be, as a point of reference, about lead arm horizontal in the backswing. You want to concentrate solely on going back to that feeling of rotating the upper against the lower body. That's the feeling that I want you to have. But as you then complete that last little bit of rotation to get to 90, this is when I want you to get the feeling of that trail hip moving along the wall. So this is then you getting that best of both worlds, where you're going to have that ability to activate and load, but also that ability to sequence where you're moving towards the left. And it's so important, because I see it on a day-to-day basis, when you can get golfers moving in this way to this capacity, all of a sudden it all starts to feel better and just more powerful and better sequenced. And well, that will give you much more confidence transferring this to the golf course. And the more you get familiar to those sort of drills and exercises, turn the chest, recenter, then go, then you will be able to, and I see it a lot, where golfers can then transfer this when they go and hit balls down the range. They get the sequence of turn back, recenter, then rotate. And like I say, all of a sudden the whole sequencing just starts to gel so much more together. And I promise you it will make such a big difference. Turn this way, then recentering, and then triggering that rotation. And it's going to make a massive difference to your game. Now, what will also make a massive difference is, well, this video here, because if there's some of you that are quite familiar with some of the topics that I've talked about today, but you're still struggling to trigger that rotation in the downswing, well, then Lynn discovered a particularly interesting move, again, concentrating on how the chest would be moving, that you should find really useful. I'll see you soon.